So that went a lot quicker than I was anticipating. Hello, my name is Leah. Welcome back to my channel. Today is episode number 2 of my middle grade writing challenge. If you did not see episode 1, that is kind of where I went into a bit more detail about what the challenge is, what my timeline is. But if you did not see that, the gist is basically that I wanted to give myself a challenge to sort of get back into writing after having not done that like all year. And I had a really fun idea for a middle grade, so I thought that I would challenge myself to finish a zero draft of that middle grade in 2 months. Not all of that time is going to be drafting. Today we are going to be working on the outline. Well, not just today, we're going to be working on the outline like all of this week and probably next week as well. Or at least sort of a mix of brainstorming and outlining, because those two things don't really happen as separate stages for me. They sort of feed into one another. As I have ideas, I'm immediately like plugging that into structure, and then I'm using structure to help me get ideas, if that makes sense. So these two things happen very much at the same time. As this is the first day of my little outlining pair of weeks, I wanted to sort of lay out a baseline of what I have so far, and then hopefully that will help sort of clarify what progress I've made later on. These things have come to me in bits and pieces over the past few weeks, even while I was doing some of my research and before that as well. I started a note on my phone so that literally like anytime I have an idea, I can just get on that note, jot it down. There's no organization. It's literally just like notes, and then anytime I have a new thought, I just add it to the bottom and we keep doing that. So it's all out of order. It's a jumbled mess, but it is a good brain dump space for me. I'm also going to be calling this book Project Game. Now, I know that's probably a stupid decision because I had a different project game that I was working on in 2021, I think it was. This is not the same story. This is a completely different story, but Project Game, I think, fits this better. So this is going to be Project Game. The other middle grade that I was working on is now going to be Project VR, although that one is like pretty shelved right now. I'm not planning on picking it up anytime soon, although there may be a time where I do end up picking it up at some point. So with that out of the way, this is what I have so far for Project Game. One is the concept. I already told you last episode that I want to do sort of a parody of that like mentor trains a mentee for the tournament story arc that happens in film. But more specifically, I want to write a book where a middle school boy is training his grandma to play competitive video games so that she can compete in a competitive video game tournament at the end. This is why it's a middle grade, and also why my main character is the mentor in this scenario and not the mentee. So there's some interesting plotting things that is gonna bring up in terms of making the flow of the story actually come out of my main character's action rather than my side character's action. But yeah, that's a problem for this week, actually. That was sort of the first thing that came to me in this case. I have some plot beats, although most of them are very vague right now, and I don't know if they are actually in the places that I'm thinking of them. Some are more set than others. Like I have a catalyst that I think is pretty strong and that I think is going to stay where it is and be the actual catalyst. I also have an opening and a final image in mind, like in terms of a scene. I know what I want the first scene to be and I know what I want the end scene to be, which is really nice because especially for ends, I struggle with Act 3 a lot. It feels really good to have a final image so early on, so I know what I'm working towards as I sort of plot this out. As for some maybe more iffy beats, I have an idea for a midpoint. I'm not quite sure if it works yet. I have an idea for an all is lost, and I have some stuff for like the second half of Act 2 and like the bad guys close in. Fun and games, first half of Act 2, nothing. I got nothing. Like zero direction, zero ideas, zero scene images, literally nothing. And I think the reason why some of these other beats are a little bit fuzzy for me and why I'm not quite sure if they will work or not is because I really don't know what my main character's arc is going to be yet, which is strange for me because normally I start with the internal and I sort of fill in the external around that. But this time the external is what has been coming to me, and the internal is what I know very little about, and that's gonna be a lot of my focus, I think, early on this week, is just figuring out what are my characters' arcs, specifically my main character, what is his arc, how do these relationships work together. I have character like placeholders, if that makes sense. So within the story, I know I need a character. Obviously, that's the grandma. I want a mom, dad, and a sister in the family. I know I want a best friend. I know I want a shop owner of a game store. Like, I have these placeholders that I need to insert characters into, but I have no idea who these people are yet, and I've done like literally zero character work. And that's about it. I have enough that I feel confident this could be something, but not nearly enough to have any idea what shape this story is going to take. So I'm excited this week to dive into getting some of that sorted out, and I'm interested to see if I continue just having external ideas and struggle with the internal, or if getting to the internal is what's going to unlock the rest of the external. Okay, so I have been working on a Save the Cat beat sheet for Project Game for the past 2 days. I'm at a place now where I feel like I've got something, but there's still something about it that's just not quite working for me. Basically, going into it, there were a few scenes that sort of slotted into the beats fairly naturally. Like, I kind of knew where they were placed. It was pretty easy to figure that part out. And then from there, I was trying to sort of build out and connect the dots. This is a very vibes-based process. So I basically am just feeling out the story and seeing what works and seeing what fits. But as I sort of started adding some layers, I realized I really did need to nail down that internal arc for my main character before I went forward with some of the external. So I took a step back from the beat sheet, and this is just my outlining process. I jump around from like different tools and different methods all the time just to sort of like dip my toes into different things and then hopefully in the end come together with one cohesive story. But I took a step back from the beat sheet and I went to a sort of character sheet template that I got from Lizelle Sambury, which basically has you identify some of those internal things from the character. I didn't quite fill it out completely. I got a few notes in. I intended to do some of the other characters in this character template sheet, but I ended up not doing that. I jumped back into the beat sheet and continued filling some stuff out because that process did unlock some ideas for me. And just to give you an idea of how that went, it was fairly easy to decide on a midpoint after I got some more character info, and I kind of knew what I wanted from the bad guys close in second half of Act 2 beat, but my problem areas were the fun and games and then Act 3. And Act 3 is like always a problem area for me, and looking back, fun and games actually has been a struggle for me in the past as well too. What happened with Act 3 is obviously with my concept of middle school boy trains grandma to compete in a video game tournament, there's sort of this inherent promise in that premise to the reader that says you're gonna get to see grandma competing in the tournament. What is difficult about that is in a normal arc of this type of story where the main character is the mentee and the one who was being trained, then that makes sense. The tournament would be Act 3, we'd get to see them succeeding, there would be a twist in the middle, and then we get to see how they recover and end up winning or losing in the end. But in this scenario where my main character is not the one participating in the tournament, I can't really have the tournament be Act 3 because then it's like, what is my main character doing? It suddenly becomes a very inactive story, and that can't happen. So my first thought was to put the tournament in the bad guys close in, actually, in Act 2, and have that prompt a moment that becomes sort of like the darkest night section, and then Act 3 is just something completely different. And this is what I have on my beat sheet right now. I like the end. It feels good to me. It gets me towards that final image that I like know is like a certain thing. Like that's the only thing I know about Act 3 for sure is that final image. And so it does its job and it makes the main character active, but there's just still something that feels off about not having the tournament be in Act 3. That's what I have right now. That's kind of what I'm going off of. I'm reminding myself that A, this is just the first draft of the beat sheet. I can change this even in my outlining process. But B, even if I don't change this in my outlining process, like this is just a draft 0. It's gonna get changed in revisions anyways. I think Project Shadows has just made me insecure about Act 3. But after I sort of got that in place, it was a bit easier to go return to the fun and games and just like give myself a few notes. Those Act 2 beats, fun and games and bad guys close in, I don't have specific scene ideas for yet, but I know functionally how they should be working, if that makes sense. Like I know the fun and games is gonna be a downward path. I know that that means he has to be failing at training grandma. The relationships that he's surrounded with are not going well, and it seems like he's not making any progress towards the goal. How that actually plays out, no clue. That's a problem for future Leah to solve. Quicker than I was anticipating. Yesterday I wrapped up making the beat sheet for Project Game and something still felt off. But I got to the point where working in the beat sheet wasn't gonna solve that problem because the beat sheet can only do so much in showing you the actual flow of the story, specifically scene by scene. What I needed to do was just jump into the outline. I was being pulled that direction to start and just to give myself a basis in trying to figure out how many chapters and where to actually place things in a more outlined format. I took that 39,000 word count goal that I had, assuming about 1,500 to 2,000 words per chapter, which I'm new to middle grade, so I have no idea if that is reasonable or not. It seemed like that was the case online, but if you have any other information on that, let me know. But using that sort of divided out how many chapters I wanted and then just sort of finessed based off of what felt right. But I took those estimates yesterday and I plugged in the scenes that I knew for certain, or at least as certain as you can be in this stage of the writing process. A lot of that was very Act 1 heavy, so after I got all of those things filled in, I was able to sort of fill in the gaps in Act 1. So today I sat down expecting to struggle through Act 2, as I always do, but it didn't really take that long for me to figure things out in a way that I really enjoy. And by the time I got to the end of Act 2, I really liked this flow that was happening, but I got up against that problem that I talked about before about the tournament. And in my beat sheet, I have the tournament in Act 2. It's the thing that prompts the all is lost. But something about that I think was what was feeling wrong to me about the beat sheet. And so when I got up to this point in the outline, I was like, yeah, no, that's definitely wrong. There was a piece that was missing in order to make it work in Act 3 that clicked for me. I was like, oh wait, no, this is the break into 3 moment, and then that would lead into the tournament supernaturally. But the tournament doesn't have to span all of Act 3. It could just be like one scene or one chapter. And I know exactly now what my main character is going to be doing during that. Even though he's not participating, he's still going to be doing stuff that makes him an active character. And then as we end the tournament, we get sort of that Act 3 twist that turns things on their head, and then the main character has to deal with, all right, how am I going to solve this new problem with all of the new skills that I've learned throughout the book? And I'm really excited about how that just sort of all came together. I'm not excited in the sense that like I feel confident that this is exactly what Act 3 needs to be, and I know that the process is more complicated than that, but this is definitely a huge win for this stage when things start to click together and the puzzle pieces just start fitting in a way that feels natural and exciting. And this was something that wasn't quite happening with Project VR. I was sort of having to pigeonhole in stuff to make a story, but it didn't feel organic, if that makes sense. It lacked a sort of soul behind it, but this one, I can feel the soul behind the story. This is where I sound like a major pretentious writer person. But it's hard to explain if you haven't felt it. I know you guys as other writers know what I'm talking about when I say there's something about a story that just takes on a life of its own, and it's just this feeling you get that's like, yes, this is the book that I need to be writing right now, and it's a good feeling, and it makes you feel like you're taking steps in the right direction. And that's what I feel like right now after finishing this outline. All of that to say, I finished the project game outline, at least a draft 1 of it. I don't really feel like I need a draft 2 though. Like, I feel like I've solved the problems that I need to solve at this stage. Obviously, I know things are going to continue to change, but in the same way that it felt right to move from the beat sheet to the outline, it's feeling right to move from the outline to the draft. And in the draft, I know I'm going to find other problems that I can fix when I get to them, but right now, I don't think there's any problems that I'm gonna be able to fix on the outline level until I actually get into the words, which puts me like a week ahead of schedule. I'm gonna send my outline to some friends, some writer friends who I trust, and if they have any particular notes, I'm probably gonna be doing some tweaking to the outline in the upcoming week, but I did start the draft actually. I wrote about 500 words into the first chapter. Right now, we're on the right track. We're ahead of schedule, and I'm feeling very good about this writing challenge. Episode 3 of this series is going to be the first of 3 writing vlogs as I try to finish this 0 draft. Let me know what you are working on right now. How's it going? And do you have any stories about the moment that things click? Like, when is the last time that you had that type of moment for a story, and how did that feel? I would love to hear your stories about that. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye!